Where did you get your information from that dairy is healthy?
Oh, just in the last couple years from the TV. So no, I have not looked into it. I've just kind of taken their word for it. They're not going to say, well, I shouldn't say they're not going to say something on TV that's not true.
The medical specialist stated, "It is my opinion that the ears, nose, throat, and accessory organs of all participating subjects examined by me were not adversely affected in the 6 months period by smoking the cigarettes provided." Remember this report and buy Chesterfields, regular or king size.
But they wouldn't say that milk is good for you if it really wasn't. And again, that's what we feed our babies.
Looking at the meat and the dairy group, of those two groups, which should I give up? The question is, you should give up the dairy group. You'll get much better results than giving up the meat group. And the reason is dairy is basically liquid meat. It has essentially the same macronutrient properties, the same amount of fat, cholesterol, protein, lack of fiber, and so on. They're very similar in their nutritional makeup, but dairy has some extra problems, allergy problems, autoimmune diseases that it causes. They think dairy is health food. They look at a block of cheese and they think strong bones. They don't think glob of fat. So psychologically, they eat dairy guiltlessly, and they eat large amounts without any reservation. So if I was going to give one powerful message to a patient, to a community, to a country, to a world, is get off the dairy. You'll improve your health more than getting off the meat.
When they say milk has calcium, everybody needs calcium, they leave the consumer to make the connection that therefore milk is a good source of calcium, which is of course absolutely not true. The fact that the animal proteins are highly represented in dairy products will cause negative calcium balances for people, and it'll actually be the cause of osteoporosis and things of that nature. So, but these are things that people don't understand. So it's a very, very clever way. You need fat, you need protein, you need carbohydrate, you need calcium. Yes, there are things in milk that you need, but you don't need milk to get them.
The Wild West, the dairy industry can do whatever they want. They got the money, they've got the political control. There's nobody out there to put them in line, so that's what they do.
And USDA, their principal interest is protecting the livelihood of the livestock and dairy industry in this country. They also are the ones who then take this report and put out a very practical message for the public called Dietary Guidelines for Americans.
They're telling Americans what to eat, based supposedly on health, but they also have a mandate in law that they must promote American agricultural products, even the ones that are unhealthy for you. The Department of Agriculture and the people that they had appointed to this committee had industry ties. Out of 11 people on the committee to decide what Americans are supposed to eat, 6 of the 11 had financial relationships with either the dairy industry, the meat industry, or the egg industry.
Organizations that actually allow this dairy, the school lunch program to exist, and the WIC program, and food sold and made available in hospitals, I might add. Those are three big programs, big federal programs. Those programs are offering food that are nothing more than the garbage from the dairy and livestock industry. They're subsidized. If a school wants to have access to the school lunch program, and they almost all do, they have to agree to offer the dairy option. That's disgusting. That's been existing for a long time. It should stop yesterday.
The Dairy Council is obviously interested in selling milk. So even for individuals who complain of indigestion or other stomach cramps, other stomach problems, the Dairy Council wants them to keep trying to drink milk.
And they do drink the milk, and then they go to class after they've had their milk at breakfast and had their milk at lunch. They're not feeling good. They're going to be squirmy in their chairs. They're not going to be able to concentrate. They're not going to do as well in school. So in a way, it's like we're setting our kids up, those children who don't tolerate milk well, to do poorly in school.
When you're a little baby who's nursing, you have an enzyme that breaks those apart, and you can absorb them. But after the age of weaning, normally you lose that enzyme. A genetic mutation that's carried by about 85% of Caucasians has allowed them to digest this milk into adulthood, which is not the case for other races and certainly not the case for other species. Lactose intolerance is totally normal. It's a sign that you ought to get weaned.
We're the only species after weaning we tend to want to keep on drinking milk for the rest of our lives in many cases. And what do? We go get it from another animal. Why don't we drink dog milk?
Can you describe to me what you see when you picture a dairy farm?
Obviously not the slaughterhouses and things like that you don't want to picture. You picture kind of the nice rolling green hills and the little red barn in the hills, and yeah.
How does a cow give us milk constantly?
I have no idea.
In order for a cow to give milk, she has to give birth to a baby calf. And that starts the lactation process. And the mama can't stay with the calf because she's got to milk. She's got all this milk she has to give.
What happens to the milk from the sick cows?
Those we actually, what we do, we pasteurize that and feed that to the babies.
A cow can have an infection in her udder, which is called mastitis. So the somatic cell count relates to the incidence of mastitis. So if the cow has a low somatic cell count, and somatic cells normally occur in the milk. White blood cells are everywhere, right? And so they're in the bloodstream, they come into the milk, and they exist.
White blood cells are pus cells. And in analyses of the dairy that's being sold, you know, they have 350, 400,000 pus cells per cc, along with 25,000 bacteria per cc is found in regular milk that you buy in the stores.
Blood cells are present just naturally to help the baby cow. But humans, you know, when they're consuming cow's milk, that's really not a concern. And what it ends up really being is just basically pus that is present in the milk. It doesn't really help our immune systems. It's meant for a baby cow's immune system. So that's just something else that we don't need. Anytime you add hormones to something that's going to be consumed by humans, you're going to affect them in some way.
If you give them hormones to produce more and more milk, their udders can get distended, they get mastitis, which is then treated with drugs.
The 70 to 80% of calories from fat, most of which is saturated. People don't realize that. They think, oh, this is a health food. It's rich in calcium, but it's not a health food. It's terrible.
The higher the dairy consumption in different countries, the higher is the risk for osteoporosis. It's not the other way around. Like the dairy industry, I mean, they've been getting away with that yarn for quite a number of years now.
And they found that the countries where they were consuming the most milk, the countries where they're consuming the most calcium, had the highest hip fracture rates. It's actually opposite of what you would think.
At Harvard, the Nurses' Health Study tracked women, more than 70,000 women for over 18 years. What they found is those who drank the most milk had absolutely no protection against hip fractures at all. The idea that calcium is going to build strong bones is a myth.
Over and over and over again, they do these studies, they put more calcium in the system, and it doesn't help the bones.
And if we learned about nutrition, what were the factors that cause us to lose calcium, and what foods we could eat to have calcium from a healthier source, people would be much better off, and their bones would be much stronger too.
When you consume animal protein, such as found in dairy products or meats or eggs, you pull calcium from your bones and excrete it in your urine.
It's the protein in our dairy-based foods that makes it more difficult for us to keep the calcium that we're getting from dairy products in our bodies.
What happens is when you're consuming the animal protein, your blood becomes acidic and your body reacts by pulling calcium from the bones as a kind of buffer to neutralize the blood.
feed cow's milk earlier, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, even 12 months, you're taking a chance the child's going to lose iron from occult gastrointestinal bleeding. And because milk doesn't contain iron as much, and it's not as absorbable as it is from breast milk now, the potential is going to be there for iron deficiency when they're young. And iron deficiency in a young child can have effects on reducing their intelligence. And that reduction in intelligence can be there permanently for the rest of their life.
So in this home daycare, do you give the kids milk?
I have to give them milk at least 2 to 3 times a day.
You have to?
I have to. It's because of the food program that I'm on.
One of the main factors is a high diet high in animal products, especially animal products that are high in saturated fat. And as I said earlier, that the biggest contributor of saturated fat in the American dietary landscape is dairy products, cheese and butter.
Dairy products are a rich source of cholesterol and saturated fat, which are the two things you want to avoid if you're at risk for heart disease, or even if you want to prevent heart disease altogether.
If you look at what's in milk and other dairy products, it's a recipe for a heart attack. It's got an awful lot of fat in it, mostly saturated fat, the kind that raises cholesterol.
So if there was one food to wipe out to prevent heart disease, that would be cheese and butter. But when you have heart disease, you'd be crazy to eat pouring cheese and butter on your foods. But, go to a hospital and see what they feed them. See what they feed people coming out of bypass surgery. See what they bring to you when you're in a hospital. They bring you all kinds of high saturated fat dairy products.
We worked on this a total of about 27 years. And we did many, many experiments, dozens of experiments over the years, and we ask all kinds of questions. First off, is it really true that animal protein, in this case cow's milk protein, that it can increase cancer? Well, we established that point in spades. It was absolutely true. It was dramatic. And then we went to some other questions, like, for example, how does it work? You'd like to know those kind of things. To get more confidence, and the more we looked at a very fundamental level, biochemical level, we could find out this was changed, this was changed, this was changed. A whole lot of things was just sort of going wrong to create this cancer phenomenon. And then we got to a point where we could actually turn on and turn off cancer development just by giving a cow's milk protein or taking it away. That was dramatic.
Insulin-like growth factor, which is a hormone that mama cow puts in the milk for baby cow to grow, and human mothers do the same thing in human breast milk.
Because milk is designed to make things grow. And so the mother cow is putting growth factors and hormones and nutrients into the milk to cause changes in the calf's body that make the calf's cells grow.
When you're an adult, you don't need any more growth hormone. Growth hormone basically is looking around for something to do. If it finds a non-self cell or a mutated cell, then it can act on those cancerous cells and increase growth of cancer cells.
Because when we're done growing, we don't need to grow anymore, and so but our bodies still think that something needs to grow.
All of a sudden, here's cow's milk protein, the most sacred of all nutrients, I think, as we've been educated. It causes cancer. It's ridiculous. And the information we got on cow's milk protein would make it the most relevant, significant chemical carcinogen we consume. Now, the question is, why doesn't the public get to know this?
We know that milk is associated with increased risk of prostate cancer. We know that milk is associated with increased risk of ovarian cancer. We know that milk is associated with higher levels of IGF-1, which increases your risk of breast cancer. We know all these things, but the public doesn't get that information.
Who controls what the government promotes is all based on social and political concerns and economic concerns. It's not based on science.